Convicted, near unanimous verdict sinks the world boss, but not before one juror attempts to bribe another. Kartel said to be in tears as he was taken away from the Supreme Court. Earlier, Gaza fans face off against cops on bikes, in armored cars, cops wearing gas masks and carrying riot shields. The High Command even calling out the cavalry, ride or down, much to their amusement. Panicked bystanders take a tumble, the police not playing, as this man soon found out.
I'm more like in them shoes at the moment still, but most wish him all the best.
I eat KFC, I'm tired for eat. Right now I'm fasting for Kartel.
I'm nice up dancehall. Some more dancehall artists not out there, I set the thing, you know, can listen to them too.
No, him say Gaza, Empire.
If I'm not doing road, I just so we still support him. Gaza will say same way straight. Nah, let him down.
I'm supposed to be nervous because a man like that shouldn't have them thing there.
What you mean?
When I say him should have be like a Shaggy and them man there. When I mean like him should have donate some money for the children and to charity and thing.
March 13, D-Day for dancehall's most controversial, if not biggest star. Police blaming media for the crowd getting out of control. The arrival of Busta Rhymes and Junior Reid provoking a stampede by Kartel fans. Busta beats a retreat. Both entertainers denied access to the court. Inside, Judge Lennox Campbell surprising almost everyone by sending out the jurors to consider their verdict at minutes to 4 p.m. Unheard of, whispered shocked lawyers. The jury taking just under 2 hours to file back into the courtroom. But not before rumors swirl that one juror had tried to bribe the foreman. $500,000 the alleged figure. The judge summoning both prosecutors and defense attorneys to his chambers. Something was up. The judge asking the jury to try again after their initial 10-1 count. Prosecution faces breaking into smiles. The defense tense and strained as the returned jury is polled again. Kartel stony-faced as he hears the news that could put him away for life. 10-1. 10-1 also for all the rest except Shane Williams. Justice Campbell pleased with the result. Kartel with 2 weeks to go for the news to sink in before returning to court on March 27 for sentencing. Lead attorney Tom Tavares Finson pale but composed and vowing to appeal. And you say on what basis you're going to make your appeal?
All who have ears hear. The jury has given a verdict and we accept it and move to the next process.
Only Everton duo with something to smile about. His client Shane Williams freed by the jury, but shortly after, rearrested by the cops. What does a high-profile case like this do for your career?
Well, I couldn't say. I probably could have to determine that at this point.
But you feel pretty chuffed?
Indeed, we have put in some hard work over the past few months, 4 months. It's been the longest recorded trial in history.
Interviewed prior to the verdict, Shane's mom desperate to see her son walk.
I prayed last night. I got me say, so I'm not worried. That's why I come.
A reliable source telling ER Kartel was in tears as he set off on his umpteenth return trip to remand. Has a juror been arrested on bribery charges?
Well, I do know before I came over from my information from the police that they have indicated that they had reasonable cause to suspect, and from investigations that had been commenced, that one of the jurors will have to face prosecution in respect of the charge of attempted to
Did that turn the tide against the Vybz Kartel? Because the conventional wisdom maybe before today was that Kartel might beat this rap.
Well, I really don't know about the conventional wisdom. I'm a prosecutor, we go on evidence. If we have the evidence and it is cogent and it comes up to the required standard, then we have a fighting chance.
What delivered the blow?
Well, the weight of the technical evidence, and here I have to commend the professional police officers who were associated with this matter for the quality of their investigation, and also, most importantly, the evidence of the civilian witness. The witness stood up to at least 6 days of grilling from the learned defense counsel, and he was not shaken in any material.
Because in some people's mind, the Jamaican justice system was on trial here. Has it come through with flying colours?
In everybody's mind, the Jamaican justice system was on trial. The case took about 64 days, and in that particular number 2 court, the other prosecutors who were assigned with other cases, had to adjourn all their cases. So it shows up the fact that the system is under-resourced and we need more courtrooms, but the flip side is that it shows everybody that notwithstanding the challenges, you have committed professionals in the system.
Angry cartel fans staying put to voice their frustration with today's verdict.
Him not guilty. Yeah, man. The jury them not do the right thing, Benjamin. Them have to go back over again. Them have to go back over it again.
Thursday, April 3, 2014, supporters congregate in the precincts of the Home Circuit Court in downtown Kingston for the sentencing of dancehall artist Vybz Kartel and his 3 co-convicts. 3 weeks ago, they were found guilty for the 2011 murder of Clive Lizard Williams. Inside the courtroom, there were pleas for the judge to be lenient, and outside, affirmation for the dancehall artist.
A cartel a kill him, I was our teacher, we now they got him teach him, a real teacher.
But one woman would end on the wrong side of the law. She was arrested after being found with an offensive weapon and uttering indecent language.
If she will tell the policeman indecent language, don't your sister, the lady is a mentally disturbed woman. She's mentally disturbed. The police, they're mentally mad to like the woman.
If I was as talented as Kartel is talented, I would never be there. The law system not right, because them knows the lizard is a killer. Everybody knows the lizard is a killer. Everybody who do the law, them know that. Enough people lizard kill. So them shouldn't send Kartel to prison. Just feel him I get 25 years. Well, I'm a piece of them I give him 25 years.
And God will say, I love we left it to God and today.
Back in the courtroom, Justice Lennox Campbell sentenced Kartel and his 3 co-convicts to life in prison. Adidja Palmer is to serve 35 years before he becomes eligible for parole. Andre St. John, 30 years. And Shawn Campbell and Kahira Jones, 25 years.
The wickedness that we're about to deserve that, if they deserve that. 35 years, them say, if they deserve it, hard labor, wickedness that. They don't file lizard, they don't know nothing about it, the poor lizard appearing right now, wickedness that.
Shouldn't give him no life, they should just give him certain time and then come back out. They shouldn't give him no life.
The jury have spoken, the judge have spoken, and we now look forward to the Court of Appeal putting their stamp on the situation.
Up first this evening, lawyers for dancehall entertainer Vybz Kartel today urged the Court of Appeal to free him, saying he was not in Havendale, St. Andrew at the time when Clive Lizard Williams is said to have been killed.
For a third day, lawyers for the appellants continued their attempts to show weaknesses in the 2014 trial, which led to Kartel's conviction. TVJ's Vashon Brown was in court today and now joins us live. Vashon?
Thank you so much, Archie and Doreen. Now, Kartel is appealing the life sentence imposed on him in 2014 for the murder of Clive Lizard Williams. Shawn Campbell, Andre St. John and Kahira Jones were also convicted for the murder. There were several issues raised today by the lawyers representing the appellants, particularly by the lawyer representing Vybz Kartel. Issues like whether there should be a retrial and where was Kartel when Clive Lizard Williams was killed.
Vybz Kartel's lawyer Valerie-Nita Robertson today wrapped up her submissions before the Court of Appeal. During the trial in 2014, it was argued that the prosecution's key witness, Chow, went to Palmer's house on the night Lizard was killed. It was further argued that when Chow arrived at the premises at Swallowfield Avenue in St. Andrew, Kartel's dog went after him and Kartel had to intervene and was bitten by his own dog. Chow said he assisted Kartel to Andrews Memorial Hospital where he was treated. Today, Mrs. Nita Robertson told the court that hospital records, cell site evidence, and Chow's timeline are very different. In court in 2014, the trial judge asked the prosecution's main witness, "At about what time you got to the hospital?" The witness responds, "About 9 p.m., about that time." The judge then asked, "And about how long you stayed there?" The witness responded, "About half an hour, 20 minutes. It's alleged that Clive Lizard Williams was killed around 8 p.m. on August 16, 2011. Mrs. Nita Robertson told the court that there is a discrepancy.
The evidence of the police officer is that the cell site demonstrated that Mr. Palmer was at Havendale at 7:52. but the hospital records show that he was at Andrews Memorial Hospital at 7:48. So he could not be, the time span is too narrow for him to have been literally in these two places at one time.
She argued that it calls into question a number of things like the credibility of the prosecution's main witness, as well as the veracity of cell tower information that was used during Kartel's murder trial. The issue of a retrial also came up today. Kartel's lawyer urged the court to quash the conviction and not to order a new trial. She pointed to what she called the overwhelming number of deficiencies raised about the trial, like prosecutorial misconduct, breaches of the Charter of Fundamental Rights and Freedom, inclusion of inadmissible evidence, and a rush to justice.
Oh, we are saying that it's so bad. It's so bad that you ought not to give the prosecution an opportunity to fix those things that have gone bad already.
Welcome back, continuing the news. The Court of Appeal has upheld the convictions of dancehall entertainer Vybz Kartel, Shawn Campbell, Kahira Jones, and Andre St. John for the 2011 murder of Clive Lizard Williams. The decision was handed down this morning. Court of Appeal President Dennis Morrison, Justice Patrick Brooks, and Justice Frank Williams made up the three-member panel. Vashon Brown has been looking at the ruling and now reports.
Silence in the courtroom about 9:30 this morning when the three-member panel of judges arrived to hand down their decision. President of the Court of Appeal Dennis Morrison said the appeals of Adidja Palmer, better known as Vybz Kartel, Shawn Campbell, Kahira Jones, and Andre St. John against their convictions were all dismissed and the convictions upheld. One of the grounds for the appeal was the admissibility of cell phone evidence. The phone is important because it contained, among other things, 40 voice notes, 8 images, as well as text messages relied on by the prosecution. In the October 2014 trial, a police investigator admitted that there was an outgoing text message on the phone on October 1, 2011. Note here, the police took the phone from Kartel on September 30, 2011. The investigator also admitted in the 2014 trial that there were 3 outgoing calls on October 9, 2011. Prosecutors argued that the use of the phone was not malicious. In its decision, the Court of Appeal said there is no evidence of tampering with either the date or timestamps of the items relied upon by the prosecution. A mere possibility that there could have been manipulation of those items is not sufficient to disqualify those items from the consideration of the jury. The court said the fact that the phone was improperly used while in the custody of the police is too slender a basis to exclude the rest of the evidence on the phone. On March 13, 2014, there was an alleged case of bribery by one juror. The trial judge allowed the jury to deliberate after the issue was brought to his attention, but first reminded the jurors of their oath. That led the lawyers for the appellants to argue that they were tried by a contaminated and tainted jury. During the 2018 appeal hearing, prosecutors had argued that failure to discharge the jury, despite of the bribery allegation, cannot amount to a miscarriage of justice. In response to this, the Court of Appeal says it seems to us that the judge had before him enough information on which to base his discretion to continue with the trial with warnings or directions to the jury, which he ultimately did. There was nothing that could have been gained and a great deal that would have been lost by questioning the accused juror. Vashon Brown, TVJ News.
In the meantime, the Court of Appeal says it is reserving its decision relating to sentencing. The trial judge in 2014 sentenced the appellants to life imprisonment at hard labor. He ordered that Campbell and Jones should each serve a minimum of 25 years in prison before becoming eligible for parole, while Kartel should serve a minimum of 35 years and St. John a minimum of 30 years. Kartel and his co-appellants complained that these sentences were manifestly excessive. The Court of Appeal said the sentences imposed by the judge in this case cannot be said to have been excessive to such an extent as to call for the court's intervention. Now,
meanwhile, the attorney representing the dancehall artist says he will be taking the matter to the Privy Council. Anthony Lugg has more in this report.
It was not the result supporters of Adidja Vybz Kartel Palmer, Shawn Storm Campbell, and their co-accused hoped for when the judgment was handed down Friday morning. The Court of Appeal rejected the submission. Our news team spoke with defense attorney Bert Samuels after the ruling.
We waited 1 year, 8 months, hoping that the judgment would have come in our favor. With all the experience I have, I'm still in shock because this is one of the strongest appeals I've ever argued in my 41-year career at the bar. This is why I'm encouraged that we will succeed at the next level. Shawn Campbell had discussions with us. We broached to him the possibility, the remote possibility that we would have been turned down, and he said in the unlikely event we should go to the Privy Council.
The high-profile case involving Kartel and his co-accused is one of the longest in the history of the courts and generated much debate, like the fact that the justice system was also on trial. Director of Public Prosecutions Paula Llewellyn responded.
There is a view, somewhat misguided, I think, or misperceived, let me use misperceived, that some people are above the law. But every now and again, in the same way that the COVID-19 experience that we are having has touched prime ministers, ministers of health worldwide, the famous, the infamous, royalty, in the same way, the rule of law, certainly in our jurisdiction, reminds us through cases like this that nobody is above the law.
New bombshell revelations are raising serious questions about the evidence used nearly a decade ago to get a murder conviction against international dancehall superstar Vybz Kartel. And it's adding fuel to his fight for freedom. I spoke exclusively with his attorney, Isaac Buchanan. He says there's no longer any doubt key evidence was falsified, and a scientific investigation by a digital forensic expert proves it. Now the Privy Council, the United Kingdom's version of the U.S. Supreme Court, will have the final say.
Mentally, I've always been in a good place because I know I'm innocent.
For more than 10 years, Adidja Vybz Kartel Palmer has maintained his innocence in the alleged murder of Clive Williams, whose body was never found. His conviction came from a mostly circumstantial case based on a video and phone records from his BlackBerry torch and a discredited witness. Now a comprehensive investigation by a certified British digital forensic expert casts doubts about the very authenticity of this evidence. In short, he found it didn't match up with the scientific reality.
So when there is a gap between the footprint, for instance, the video didn't have any GPS on it, and all other videos on the phone had GPS, had the metadata and the epoch times in sequence.
In his detailed report, digital forensic expert David John Martin Woodgate found that the video prosecutors claim put Palmer at the scene of the crime also had a timestamp that was different from the inalterable embed time. Buchanan says Kartel was at the hospital at the time of the alleged murder, and this proves it.
Tampering or a misreporting of the time, which was crucial. So the time was clearly changed to fit the prosecution's case.
The British digital expert also found proof that the phone had been used to make calls even after it had been seized by Jamaican authorities, and that it had not been kept in a sealed evidence bag, which is standard law enforcement protocol.
There was no explanation as to storage mechanism. Why was the bag open? Why wasn't it locked? Who opened it? Who would have touched it before, during, after? All of that. So those concerns were raised by the expert.
Attorney Buchanan says the report helped convince the United Kingdom's highest court, the Privy Council, to review Kartel's appeal. They will have the final say on whether he is vindicated or must remain behind bars.
Well, the murder conviction of Jamaican dancehall icon Vybz Kartel has been overturned today.
And now authorities must decide whether the case will be retried. Fox 5's Lisa Evers is here with details about what might come next, Lisa.
Well, Stephen, Natasha, it was a stunning decision coming out of London today, an unprecedented action with international implications. The murder conviction of a Jamaican celebrity and 3 other men thrown out. But despite that big win, their fight for freedom is not yet over.
In a criminal trial, and you could hardly have a more serious trial than this, where you have 5 people accused of murder. Clearly there's a public interest in a true verdict being returned. The implication of what you're saying seems to be that the judge really has no responsibility in that regard. He's entitled, if the prosecution are willing to run the risk of the jury being nobbled by the corrupt member of the jury, that's a matter for them, and he can go along with that.
My Lords, he has to be satisfied that the other 10 won't be nobbled, or it's very unlikely they'll be nobbled. I'd accept that. But
judgment in the matter of Shawn Campbell, Adidja Palmer, Kahira Jones and Andre St. John against the King.
The Court of Appeal granted permission to appeal to the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council on 3 grounds, which were, first, that the trial judge failed properly to inquire into allegations of juror misconduct. Secondly, that the trial judge departed from standard practice in inviting the jury to retire to consider their verdict so late in the day, putting undue pressure on them to reach a verdict. And thirdly, that the trial judge erred in admitting the telecommunications data because it had been obtained in breach of the Interception of Communications Act and the Charter. The Judicial Committee of the Privy Council has unanimously concluded that the appeals should be allowed.
Grace, because it's important. When you're in public life, you have to deal with the slings and arrows coming in your direction, but you make sure that when you go through the fire, you come out on the other side like finely tempered steel, ready to wheel and go again.
And the appellant's convictions should be quashed on the ground of juror misconduct, and that the case should be remitted to the Court of Appeal of Jamaica to decide whether to order a retrial of the appellants for the murder of Clive Williams.
As the defense attorneys comb through the written judgment before going to the Privy Council, how prepared is the DPP?
When the matter was tried, the prosecution prepared the case. We were ready. When the matter went to the Court of Appeal, they took it to the Court of Appeal. They filed their grounds of appeal. We did our research. We were ready. And I believe that if it is taken elsewhere and the appeal is filed, then we will also have to be ready there.
Allegedly corrupt juror would not only have a vote, but he'd have the opportunity to influence the other members of the jury.
Well, he might still seek to influence the other members of the jury, but he wouldn't. Sorry?
In deliberation.
In deliberation. He can still say what he likes in deliberation. He can still draw attention to a good point, let us say. That can still happen. The prosecution is content to take the risk that this one juror is just going to vote against the prosecution, come what may. In my submission, he's entitled to do that.
I think the answer that would normally be given is you must discharge that juror.
If of course, I agree with that.
The board has considerable sympathy with the dilemma faced by the trial judge on the final day of a long and complex trial. Following the allegations of bribery, he had either to continue with the 11 remaining jurors or to discharge the jury.
Has a juror been arrested on bribery charges?
Well, I do know before I came over from my information from the police that they have indicated that they had reasonable cause to suspect, and from investigations that had been commenced, that one of the jurors will have to face prosecution in respect of the charge of attempted to pervert the court.
Despite this, the board considers that the approach taken by the judge was a material irregularity in the course of the trial, which makes it necessary to quash the convictions.
We waited 1 year, 8 months, hoping that the judgment would have come in our favor. With all the experience I have, I'm still in shock, because this is one of the strongest appeals I've ever argued in my 41-year career at the bar.
This is for 3 reasons. First, the direction to the jury on the final day was inadequate to save the situation. The judge simply reminded the jury that they had sworn or affirmed that they would return verdicts in accordance with the evidence they had heard in court. The judge did not refer to the alleged bribery, of which, if the allegations were true, the jurors were already aware. Secondly, the trial continued with the allegedly corrupt juror serving as one of its 11 members. In the board's view, there should have been no question of allowing juror X to continue to serve on the jury. There was a danger that the attempted bribe could have made the other jurors overcompensate, consciously or unconsciously, if they assumed that the offer must have come from one of the appellants and that therefore they must be guilty.
He's not guilty. The jury them not do the right thing, brethren. They have to go back over it again. They have to go back over it again.
It follows that there will be occasions where, as in this case, a court will have no alternative but to discharge a jury and end the trial in order to protect the integrity of the system of trial by jury.
They did not turn the tide against the Vybz Kartel, because the conventional wisdom maybe before today was that Kartel might beat this rap.
Well, I really don't know about the conventional wisdom. I'm a prosecutor, we go on evidence.
In view of its conclusion on the issue of juror misconduct, the board holds that it is not necessary to express a concluded view on the other two grounds of appeal. For these reasons, the appellant's appeals should be allowed. The court is now adjourned.
But certainly the defense is saying no retrial. The prosecution is saying there can be a retrial. There was a breach of the fair trial right, which was the central issue of this case, and whether or not the court can order a retrial in the circumstances.
It follows that there will be occasions where, as in this case, a court will have no alternative but to discharge a jury and end the trial in order to protect the integrity of the system of trial by jury.
Certainly for the defense, we would have presented affidavit evidence, which was a plethora of documents. As you can see, it went over into day 6, and even at the end of day 6, there were so many documents that the court was inundated with information that they now have to go through. I just wish to make clear that because of this, it is one of the reasons why the court now has to go through the information and have a written judgment, because this is a high public interest matter, and so the explanations coming from the court will be of great value. Certainly, in terms of the progress of the case, the client is anxious. There's not much you can tell a man who wants to get out of jail as to why is it being delayed or anything like that. It is a continuing breach, and that, as I said, that's certainly where it is. And so I have no comforting words for my clients, save to say that the court has now made it clear that they're mindful of Mr. Palmer's illness, they're mindful of the length, and that certainly they have given a time, as in the maximum time that they will be able to write the judgment and be able to hand it down. That my response is always God on time. This case is finished. From the defense bar, fresh justice is something that a concept that we ought to be looking at in terms of trying to ensure that persons who are put before the court for the very first time, that their matters don't fall into the position that the appellants are in this particular case. So in terms of pushback, the judge did make it clear that there will be some pushback for other cases to ensure that in light of Mr. Palmer's illness, that they get the judgment out at the fastest possible time. And the blame is now at the hands of the prosecution and the defense, because we inundated them with paperwork, which was my defense is it was necessary to do so.
In some people's mind, the Jamaican justice system was on trial here. Has it come through with flying colors?
In everybody's mind, the Jamaican justice system was on trial. The case took about 64 days, and in that particular number 2 court, the prosecutors, other prosecutors who were assigned with other cases, had to adjourn all their cases. So it shows up the fact that the system is under-resourced and we need more courtrooms, but the flip side is that it shows everybody that notwithstanding the challenges, you have committed professionals in the system.
Are you confident in what the ruling will be?
I'm always confident. I'm always confident. Is God on time? I only speak positive to the universe.